Hey, Restorers, welcome to a brand new series for 2026. I am very excited to have JT Kraai back with Exit Strategies, and we are doing something a little different this year. We want to give you smaller snippets of information to help answer your questions that come from the M&A space. So we are calling this the Mini Motivation Series. We're ideally going to do them quarterly. It might be more often depending on what's going on in the market. If you have questions, reach out to me, reach out to JT. We're happy to go kind of answer questions as we go. We want this to be as interactive with the industry as possible. So, JT, before we kind of kick off our first episode here, introduce yourself and share a little bit about exit strategies before for people that don't know you yet.
Oh, the pressure. Thanks,
Oh,
Michelle.
the
Always a
pressure.
pleasure, number one. So, mini motivation series. That sounds very official. JT with Exit Strategies. I help restoration owners retire. That's what I do. And my goal is to get them to sell right and retire well. So, as I've learned recently, my primary focus is to educate first, advise second, and then execute when you're ready. I had an individual tell me that, and I thought that's exactly what I do. So I'm going to start utilizing that. But it's been a great journey, and I've helped a lot of people, and love helping good people in this industry. This industry is full of salt of the earth people. So here we go.
Yes, that is absolutely true. All right. So you wrote an article late last year in CNR called The Real Question Very Few Are Asking, but Should. So, what is that question? What is the question restorers should be asking and aren't?
Well, it's that article was full of a few things, but
Yeah.
I fielded hundreds of questions the last months, really since the spring of last year when things started to slow down. And the question that nobody seems to be asking is how the deal structure has changed, what that looks
Hmm.
like. People always ask about multiples. What's happening? How are the buyers stacking up? Who's out there? Am I marketable? What's happening with values? The real question is what's happening with the structure, and the structure
Yep.
in general. No mystery. There's been downward pressure on sales and margins and claim rates. We don't have to hash any of that. But when there's a little bit of volatility or some instability in many of these businesses right now, some of that risk needs to be shared with the seller. And we call that an earnout. So there's a few percentage points that's taken from cash in a deal, and they put it on the earnout side. And that earnout side is, in layman's terms, let's let the next year or two
Hmm.
in sales and profitability, let's let that determine the final sales price. So it's a structure that's somewhat based on the future performance of the business. And that's been a real key variable lately. Earnouts have always been part of a deal structure. There's just a little more importance the last year.
Okay, so talk a little bit about, I'm going to steer us a little bit of a different direction talking about earnouts
Sure.
because this is something that people have been talking about in the industry. People that have previously sold earnouts haven't always worked out. So is there kind of some like guidelines or whatever in a deal structure to help protect, but I know you need to protect both parties in it, right? And you don't know how the company's going to perform after the sale. So what are some of the guardrails around that to make sure both parties end up okay?
There's several. I always say there's a time-based earnout, there's a money-based earnout. And what those mean in general terms, if I'm the buyer of a business, I might go to a seller and say, listen, I'll give you a percentage of sales for 3 years. Let's say it's a $10 million business and the seller really wanted 11.5, and the buyer of that business is going to offer a percentage of sales or GP. It's hardly ever of net, but a percentage over the next 2, 3, 4 years. Okay. And that will get that seller back up to what they wanted or more. Okay. Sometimes it's a really nice earnout or there's kicker checks involved. That's a money based earnout I'm sorry, it's a time based earnout where it's just a percentage over time. There's also money based earnouts where that same buyer might say, I'll give you a percentage of sales until we hit this dollar figure. And whether they hit that in 2 years, 5 years, 7 years, that seller's going to keep getting a check until the buyer hits those targets. And then there's combinations. The buyer might say, we're going to give you a percentage of sales or GP up to a couple $1 million or 3 years, whichever comes first. And ultimately, it does level the playing field. The
Yeah.
seller wants to look back and say, can we use a 3 year average or a 4 year average? Because I was much better a year or two or three ago. Well, there's other buyers who will say, show me a trailing 12 month and I'll pay you a multiple on that because the industry's moving fast right now. So
Yep.
there isn't a right or wrong answer. My job is to level the playing field and get that seller as much value as possible.
Yeah. Okay. That makes possible that makes sense. So what are you kind of seeing? You said, some deals were closing in 2025. I think there were a lot of deals that flew under the radar in 2025 that didn't have the big press releases
Mm-hmm.
and those kind of things. I think people people believe that there isn't movement in the industry if there aren't the big announcements, but there was movement in 25. So what do you think is going to happen in 26?
There was movement, and you're correct. A lot of deals do fly under the radar. There's soft
Yeah.
announcements in local business journals or local papers, but the average restore doesn't even read those. And occasionally, there's a few on LinkedIn. But the deal flow is not like it was 2020 through 2023, early into 24. We all know that. But deals are getting done, and
Hmm.
partly what's happening is selling a restoration company is a little bit like stocks. You want to buy on the upswing, right?
Yeah.
You don't want to sell on a downswing, and people don't want to
Nope.
buy on a downswing.
Nope.
So I think what's happening is the shining stars right now who have really watched their pennies and understand their P&Ls. They really understand how to get an extra 3, 4, 5, 6, 7% to the bottom line. Those businesses are shining stars. So when they hit the market, they garner a lot of attention. I brought a business to market in the New England area in September, late last week of October. Within weeks, we had multiple parties lined up, multiple offers on the table because it was nice and clean. The books were spotless. QE was a cinch essentially as far as financial QE. So those shining stars are really going to shine and they garner a lot of attention. I think to answer your question, if I'm on the right vein here, is as we hopefully this winter will start pulling us out of these too
Mm-mm.
slow winters and
Yeah.
some things will change in the industry. I think there's going to be a backlog, and maybe it's me being optimistic, but I think 27 and 28 are going to tee up for another essentially a frenzied market like we had in 21 through 24. There's a lot of people pressing pause right now till the numbers bounce back a little bit, and then there's going to be a lot of activity again.
I I have to agree. And there have been a lot of companies
Yeah.
that have been working on their efficiencies, making sure their companies run really well, and have been using these last 18 to 24 months to really
Yep.
run a clean operation so that when we come out of it, they are ready. So,
It's so
yep.
true. And I'll interject one more thought. There's a lot of resources out there right now. 15
Hmm.
years ago, there was a handful of consultants that could help, and we know who they are. They're very good at what they do. And
Yep.
now there's lots and lots of resources, lots of specialists. So if people are unsure of where to turn, reach out. I mean, I refer consultants almost 3 or 4 times a week. I mean, there's a lot of
Yeah.
referrals that go out, just trying to help business owners get their arms around their numbers.
Okay, so in that vein, as we wrap it up, if you could give business owners, restorers, one piece of advice going into 2026, what would it be, especially if they are in the spot of maybe thinking about selling, maybe thinking now's the time to get a new valuation? What should they know?
Well, even if they're within 3, 4, 5 years,
Hmm.
Michelle, now's the time. And I call this an exit ramp, and that's this
Yeah.
period of when you start making decisions with a purpose. And first, I'd say you have to want to know. There are business owners who kind of hide behind what they don't know, and their business is good, it's solid, but there's that thing that they're afraid to look at, or they're afraid to pull back the covers a little bit. Face it. You've
Yeah.
heard me say, ask afraid. Just ask. What's the worst that can happen? You uncover it and it's there. So let's hit it head on. So I would say ask, really want to know. And if you don't really want to know, it's kind of wasted effort. That's number
Yeah.
one. And then number two, I would say ask questions. Years ago, 10, 12, 20 years ago, lots of owners had all the answers. The industry wasn't that complicated. It's gotten complicated, right? The tech
Yes.
stacks, all the software. Ask questions.
Yep.
There's a lot of 65-year-olds who are still running their business that are afraid of technology, that
Yes.
don't want to use AI, don't want to go to their phone for information. Ask a few questions because if an owner has all the answers right now, it's pretty rare. So ask.
Yep.
And if they're willing to do that and kind of pull back the sheets a little bit, you're light years ahead of people who don't want to do those things.
Yep, absolutely. All right, JT. Well, thank you. And for people who are listening, again, feel free to shoot one of us an email if you have questions you want us to talk about, and we will see you on the next update, JT. Thanks.
All right. Thanks so much, Michelle.